Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Teach Me Something Tuesday episode of the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. F. Scott Feil, and today we're talking about part two in a three-part series of feedback. The first one was about giving effective feedback. This second one is about receiving feedback, and this is something that I had to work on pretty thoroughly, and I'm still working on to this day, positive and negative. I wasn't really great at receiving feedback. I'm definitely working on it. But there's a great book and a resource out there for you called Thanks for the Feedback by Stone and Heen. It's a good book on how to best receive feedback. Some of the major tips and takeaways are we have to recognize that there's three different types of feedback, right? There's appreciation feedback, coaching feedback, and evaluation feedback. Appreciation feedback is about acknowledgement and encouragement, right? Like, hey, you did a great job. Thanks for that. Coaching is aimed a little bit more at helping the recipient improve, right? Like batting coaches. I go back to that example all the time. They're trying to help the batter improve by giving helpful feedback. And then last but not least is evaluation type feedback, which really provides an assessment or a ranking against some set of standards, right? So it would be like a test or an exam, right? It gives a number that's kind of standardized based on, what knowledge you've gained, right? Of these three, we have to realize that a lot of times there's triggers that we personally have that can block feedback or us receiving the feedback. And these are big ones that I had to work on. The first one is a truth trigger, right? Where the feedback seems like wrong or unfair, and it's not telling the truth or the whole story, feels like a personal jab or an attack. The second one is relationship triggers, right? Where it depends on who, as the overall giver of the feedback is, and that can affect how we receive it, right? If it's a superior versus maybe somebody who works for you versus a loved one, right? And then last but not least is the identity trigger, where the feedback sends this feeling or sense of threatening to ourself, right? So the big thing that we have to work on when receiving feedback is really learning to navigate emotional responses. Again, my knee-jerk reaction was to get defensive with feedback, especially negative feedback, right? Whereas positive feedback, I would just kind of like brush it aside or deflect, right? But if we navigate emotional responses, one of the things that I've worked on that has helped a little bit is stoicism, right? And just taking that pause, that moment of thinking about that before I say something too quickly or have that knee-jerk reaction, right? And self-awareness is really the key to not letting our emotions cloud our judgment or hinder our growth when it comes to feedback. We have to kind of look at feedback as a positive, as a blessing, and a way for us to improve and get better. The more you reframe it and look at it like that, the easier it is to navigate those emotional responses and realize it's not a personal thing. It's not an attack. The next thing we need to think about is really understanding the feedback that we're getting, right? It's crucial that we clarify and understand feedback before we react to it. And sometimes that just means asking for specifics or, checking on our assumptions, right? Or our biases. And again, separating the message from the messenger, right? We're not mad at the person for giving feedback. They're just saying what they saw and observed and maybe giving, opportunities for improvement, right? They're not a bad person for giving us negative feedback. They're trying to help. But we have to take that message and do something good with it, right? And taking responsibility for your learning, right? That's a big one too. You really want to make sure that I like to call it like extreme ownership, right? Like Jocko Willink stuff, right? You have to really be proactive. Instead of waiting on feedback, we have to go out and seek it out, right? You want to ask it from people who are going to give you an honest opinion, honest feedback, not just fluff you up and blow sunshine at you, because that doesn't always help. Being in a yes chamber, an echo chamber where everybody's patting everyone on the back. We need open, honest feedback, right? The next thing we need to consider is, again, cultivating that growth mindset. We think about Carol Dweck's book on mindset, where it's fixed mindset and we're born with what we have. It is what it is, versus growth mindset, where we can actually get better and work on things and add skill sets and improve, right? And when we have that mindset of growth, right? We view feedback then as essential for learning and improvement. And that way, when we do see feedback, even if it's critical, we see it as a pathway to growth. The next tip or trick or pointer with receiving feedback is really engaging in effective dialogue. It's important to recognize that feedback is a two-way street, right? And the best way to receive it is to ask more questions, inquire, right? Be curious, inquisitive. Just think, have a conversation. Don't just sit there and take feedback, take feedback, take feedback. Figure out ways that you can actually ask questions to make the feedback even better, right? Well, can you explain what you mean by this? Or tell me a little bit more about what you meant by this. Could you show me maybe an example of what you're talking about, right? Because again, that two-way street will ensure that both parties are working together, and that feedback is productive, and that's not like an authoritative talking down thing and you feel like small and belittled. Instead, you feel empowered by the feedback. So I hope that was helpful, and we'll see you on the next one.